One of the biggest risks in residential care isn't regulators, it's families. A single dispute with a resident's family can turn into a six-figure lawsuit. And if you don't have the right agreements and policies in place, you'll lose. That's why I built a step-by-step system for starting residential care facilities the right way. It protects you, your staff, and the people you serve. If you usually watch my videos and you're a med spa owner, you're probably a little confused why we're talking about residential care providers. But stick with me. Real estate is the end game for building wealth, and a residential care facility or provider is the way that you do that in healthcare. And a lot of the concepts are going to be the same as other healthcare providers like med spas. Again, we're going to use a legal entity to set up. We're not going to do this in our own name. It's going to be a limited liability company or potentially a professional limited liability company. Or at a minimum, a corporation. We're talking to an attorney or CPA again to decide which one we're going to do. But the reason we do that is so that when we get a license, a residential care license, it's not in our personal name, because then we have unlimited liability for our car, our house, our savings, and our own name. So ultimately, the entity is using its legal protections to shield you if you do get in trouble. State licensing. So state licensing is very complicated for residential care providers. And it's not enough to try and struggle through this on your own. You're already paying thousands of dollars a month in mortgage payments or owning the real estate or subleasing it. It makes sense to invest in skilled providers, attorneys, and those who actually know how to navigate that process quicker. Because if you screw the application up and it gets delayed another 6 months or a year, think of all the money that you're burning through just to have that property sitting there empty. Getting matched with somebody that knows what they're doing is absolutely critical. It's very easy to look at the license on the state's website and say, this isn't so bad. I think I could do numbers 1 through 8 and maybe struggle through number 9. But this is effectively an all or nothing application. And what I mean by that is we submit a big set of documents to reviewers, and then a bunch of time goes by, and after they finally review it, they're going to say, yep, thumbs up, you're good, you're approved, you're out the door. Or now there's a bunch of corrections you need to make and you're in the back of the line, another 6 months that are lost. What you can do here, which is very smart, is to apply for the entity and the license in parallel at the same time. So there's a lot of mini steps at the beginning. We need that entity set up first. And generally, depending on the license type, we're probably going to need an actual location secured. But that's not always the case. Smart to talk to a professional who knows what they're doing, because there might be a little competitive advantage there for you to actually get approved by the city, the county, the state beforehand, before actually going through and buying a property. So that's really important. Once your foundation is set, the next battle is compliance, and it's not optional. All right, we'll call this the Snapchat story. So what happened is we got a call from a assisted living facility. And unfortunately, we came to find out that one of the residents had sent out a Snapchat, a public one that could be accessible by all of the staff. And the staff there, unfortunately, started to engage and respond. Now, this was an automatic vulnerable adult maltreatment investigation, unfortunately. The reason being is that even though the resident or recipient in this situation started everything, it was the staff that started to engage. And so these are some of the nuances of HIPAA and residential or resident privacy that you don't think about when you're doing a facility like this, where it's very important to have an attorney involved. Now, there's a lot of opportunities with residential care providers. There is certainly a lot of daily revenue and a lot that can be done. But on the flip side of the coin, there's also a lot of regulations and a lot of blurred relationships between staff, recipients, and in this case, using social media. And it's not just Snapchat. It could be Instagram, it could be Facebook, it could be just texting. And so having protocols in place and having the right boundaries for all of that is what's going to make sure that you are legally compliant and still operating well, still having, professional fun with your recipients or your residents as you're providing care, but also doing so with boundaries, which can be very easily crossed. Now, in this situation, what could have happened is we wouldn't have to mention, a Snapchat policy, but we could have had a training policy that said what to do with communications with recipients, including social media, including texting, including how to use a phone. And this is for staff to know, not just kind of sign at the end of the year. So here's the deal. Compliance is not necessarily fun or easy with residential care providers, but I think it's very fruitful, and that's why not everyone gets to the point where they can buy real estate or have a residential care facility. If it was easy, everyone would do it. But with compliance in place, the last step is building strong contracts and agreements that protect you from disputes. Every time family is involved, you're bound to have unspoken expectations. Now, here's a wild thing I'm going to say as an attorney, which is that we should have agreements in writing. And specifically, when we're talking about a residential care provider, we need those residential and family agreements to have very strong clarity on services, fees, and responsibilities. Because what happens is you, as the daughter, the son, what have you, bring your parents in to an assisted living facility, and you have all of these unspoken expectations. I'm on the other side of that as a residential care provider, and I need to clearly articulate what's included and what's not included. Because when you look at the fees, it's not uncommon to spend $5,000 to $10,000 a month to put these residents into care. And so you really have to battle and show on the front end what value is there, and that's going to be right there in those residential contract agreements. Same goes for staff contracts. Same concept. We're dealing with pretty skilled licensed professionals, and they're caring for rather sophisticated or rather complex patient care. And so we need to clarify the roles, the pay, and sometimes even talk about things like non-solicitation agreements, because if a resident moves to another facility, that could be $100,000 a year in terms of revenue when I'm thinking of it as the business owner. Finally, there's vendor contracts. So if I'm purchasing supplies for the nurses to use on a day-to-day basis, we're talking about maintenance of the facility, cleaning, or services like food or bingo or whatever's happening at the facility. We got to be very clear in all of those written contracts as to what's going on and what to do. Now, the reason we utilize contracts is, at the end of the day, it just creates trust and it reduces disputes. It saves money and it means smoother operations. And so now with entity, compliance, and contracts in place, you're not just opening a care facility, you're building one that can last. You've got the roadmap for starting a residential care facility. In the next episode, we'll shift gears and talk about what happens once your business starts scaling past $1 million and the legal mistake you must avoid.